X-Men. You were the X-Men.
The one you feed. What's up, guys? Welcome back to House of Power. We are here for movie number 11, the final X-Men movie. This is our live-action X-Men and Deadpool in review. My name is Kyle. We got the Wolverine hat, guys, the X-Men shirt. And, guys, this was a sleeper hit for me. I think this is going to surprise people where I put this movie. But if you haven't seen this series before, what I do is go through my thoughts on this movie, guys. I give my favorite character a score out of 10, and we rank this movie compared to the first 10 movies. Like I said, the final X-Men. X going to give it to you. Let's go. Didn't know this was a horror movie. This was a great runtime of an hour and 36 minutes. Nice zip and zap, in and out, sweet and short, whatever you want to say, guys. I was like, okay, expectations are low. I don't know how this ties in. It's probably going to be a small scale, which it is. But this is more of like a Breakfast Club meets horror meets X-Men sort of thing. Although this isn't X-Men property technically, and there are mutants, but there's not a lot of towards the end there is, but there's not a ton of power usage. This is more of like I said, it reminded me of a Breakfast Club, except the horror genre. And I was like, oh, that couple scenes were happening. And I was like, I didn't know this was horror. It now, looking at the Disney Plus page, it says horror coming of age for the categories. I didn't see that. I just hit play on that bad boy. And then I didn't know what the vibe was going to be. I thought it was going to be kind of like a goofy, silly, like maybe some bad acting. And I was surprised, dude. The cast is pretty likable. I mean, we get Jonathan Byers in here. We get Arya Stark. Annie, I don't know who that girl is, but she was great. The only character I didn't really vibe with was the blonde girl. And her character was just written very strangely, where she's just like a huge bitch at the beginning, and she's racist, and she's a bully. And we're like, okay, usually, bullies are because something traumatic happened or something happened to them, so now they're lashing out to other people. But we get glimpses of that with the creepiest, like basically Slender Man, like faceless guys, kind of look like the Gravekeeper, whatever, from Witcher 3, and kind of like Voldemort. Super creepy. They have smiley face things, and I was like, oh. The first time that happened, I was like, oh, this is a scary movie, and I was like, oh, this is cool. This is like psychological horror too. And what I love about this movie is that something is like eerie and something's off, and you just feel kind of uncomfortable the whole time. It's also like a small setting, and it feels like there's a small facility, and at times it felt like it was kind of low budget. But I think that actually kind of worked in its favor, where I was like, oh, I feel like I kind of know these rooms, and there's a pool there. I didn't even know there was a pool there, and the blonde chick and the chef dude, the guy that gets hot, he is like just horny for her at the end. But it's not a perfect movie by any means, guys. But I had a lot more fun with this, and this was a lot better produced than I thought it was going to be. I mean, the effects were awesome. The demon bear at the end was amazing looking, and something was up with this woman, Nereus, I think her name was, where she was watching them, and I was like, she seems nice, but what's going on here? Why is she always watching them? And they're like, oh, well, you get to go to our superiors building the X-Men, and there's mention of the Essex company, and they haven't mentioned Essex enough in these movies for me to be like, oh my god, it's not like Stark Industries or something, So I'm like, oh, okay, is that supposed to mean something for me? But something's clearly off. But it is a smaller scale, she's like emailing these guys, and she gets a message, it's just like terminate subject. But Danny doesn't know her powers, and we're like, what are her powers? But we have solitary confinement sections here, and it was very mysterious, but in a way that I felt made it really intimate and nice. And there's kind of the groups that click off, and Maisie Williams' character, I think her name is Rain or whatever, she kind of turns into a wolf. It's kind of obvious, but she falls in love, or she has a crush on Danny, and then they sneak away through the vents and kiss. Also, Danny was in the vents at first, dude. I think that's how the movie opened, where Danny's sleeping there, and Rain is in the vents, and she looks at the vents, and there was like a face looking there, but it was kind of blurry, and I was like, oh my god, that was the first time where I was like, oh, that was unsettling. And then Jonathan Byers' character, that obviously Jonathan Byers isn't the actor's name. He's Jonathan Byers from Stranger Things. Let's be honest. And whenever the monsters and stuff came out later, he's like, you don't have to be afraid of them. And I was like, that's because Jonathan Byers knows. He should have been like, I've been in Stranger Things. I've been in the Upside Down. I know how to deal with these things. All jokes aside, guys, I really enjoyed the cast. The only one I didn't really vibe with, like I said, was the blonde girl, because they made her super mean, and then she was kind of the hero, but then she wasn't really likable. And she had this awesome power and this awesome sword. But I was like, you didn't really have this redeemable moment. And she's like, oh, I killed 18 men. And we're like, whoa. And then she says she killed 18 men. And then after that, the dude's trying to hook up with her alone in the pool. And I was like, dude, she killed 18 men. Now, were they like 18 child molesters? Were they 18 murderers? We don't know. It's kind of presumed that these were crappy people and she killed them. So, it's like that Brooklyn Nine-Nine. It's like, cool motive, still murder. And so you're like, okay, I don't know why the other people are in there. It's not really explained. The accent that we're just gonna call him Jonathan Byers for the sake of this review. The accent that he did, kind of bad. But we see him like go super fast, but then even his backstory where he was like working in a coal mine or something, and he like had a panic attack basically and got claustrophobic, and his powers got unleashed, and he went through and like presumably collapsed the mine and killed his dad and everything. And I think that's his dad we see in that little flashback scene at the end where he's like, Sam, what did you do or whatever. I just thought it was all really well done, and it was nice, and it was quick, and I just wasn't expecting that level of quality from this project, and it does feel small in scale. Like it, you can tell that it's not really an X-Men movie, but they do kind of tie it in. And I like that. I thought we were gonna get a big cameo at the end when they said perimeter breach. I thought like someone was gonna come through, like Cyclops or someone, and I was like, oh, but this is a smaller, more intimate story, and I with a lot of horror elements that I didn't think were gonna happen. And when those guys were chasing him around without the faces, I was like, oh my god, dude, like nightmare fuel. So I had a good time with this, guys. It surprised me, and it was just, I think, a good, nice, quick, good watch overall. My favorite character, guys, was Danny. She's kind of the main character, but I thought she was just really sweet and charming and curious. And she was the first one that was like, something's wrong here. Like, what's going on? And she kind of reaches out to Rain, and that's kind of the connection because no one's really treating her right, or she's picked on initially by the blonde girl, who I still think is not a very good character. But Danny is the main character in a sense, and her line opens up the movie where it's, we start with her dad dying in front of her. She's hiding in the tree, and then we later find out at the very end of the movie that I think it was her demon bear that got him, and she didn't know that obviously, so it's scary. And but I guess that was her biggest fear. So her biggest fear was her dad dying, which ended up killing her dad, I think, which is like something within itself. Her character, I think, was the best one, and I think the most interesting. And I just love how this whole idea that you don't get your powers until puberty is really interesting. How she's like, you could live 13 years of normal life, and then suddenly you have your powers, and it kind of throws everything on a loop. And so that's an interesting part that they kind of put into the universe, or maybe that was part of the universe. But I just like how it was a small, intimate cast, and I thought Danny was the best character in this little group here. Okay, guys, that brings us to the score. And guys, with all the horny energy in this movie, this is going to get a 6.9. Nice. This was surprising to me. The only reason this isn't getting a higher score is because of the small scope and the limited connections to the X-Men universe. I can't, in good faith, give this a higher score, even though I think the quality is really good, and I thought some of the performances were really good, and the story was interesting, and the visual effects were cool, because of the limited nature of it just being in this one facility, and they're in this dome, and you feel encased in it, and it makes it intimate. But I can't be like, oh, I can't honestly put this above like what some of the X-Men movies that were like, you have all the characters and you have a planet threat, and you got Wolverine and you got Cyclops and all that, and Charles Xavier. This, I think, you have to give this a higher score because of the strong quality, but also recognizing that it's got to go kind of lower. It's not, I'm not going to be putting this in the upper echelon, but I think a 6.9 is a good score. I didn't talk about the pool scene too, dude, where the guy's hooking up with the blonde girl, and then I think she teleports back to the room, and then there's like his dead girlfriend's hand, or like the burnt hand, comes up behind him. And I was like, oh my God, dude. Again, the visuals were awesome in this movie. And just the character interactions, I think were really good, not great. And again, that's why I'm giving it a good score, not a great score, because there were parts of this movie I really liked and I really enjoyed my time with it. But I see the limitations and the faults as well, and the smaller scale, and I have to give it the score that it gets. Guys, that brings us to the rankings. So 11 X-Men movies done. This is how our X-Men rankings shape up. Number 1, guys, X-Men Days of Future Past, a 9.5. Number 2, X-Men The Last Stand at a 9.4. Number 3, Logan at a 9.1. Number 4, the original X-Men at an 8.1. Number 5, the Wolverine is 7.1. And this one's going to slot in at number 6, guys, with a 6.9. Number 7 is going to be X2 X-Men United at a 6.6. Number 8, X-Men First Class, 6.2. Number 9, X-Men Apocalypse at 5.4. Number 10, X-Men Origins Wolverine at a 5.2. And rounding out the list at number 11, X-Men Dark Phoenix at a 5.1. And that is how our X-Men rankings shape up through 11 movies. All right, guys, that's it for House of Power, 11th episode. So all we have left now, guys, Deadpool 1, Deadpool 2, and Deadpool Wolverine. I'll have to do some thinking. I don't know if I'm going to have a separate list. I think that we're going to loop Deadpool in there, but it is a little confusing because it's like we're doing X-Men and Deadpool in review, but would feel weird ranking Deadpool against these X-Men movies since these are all X-Men movies. And I talked about in the rankings how I kind of determine the score in the ranking is how much of an X-Men movie is it. But it is closely tied to the X-Men too, so we'll see, guys. I got to think on it, but we'll probably keep it as one list to kind of make it one big series. But just keep that in mind that the Deadpool movies are kind of separate from the X-Men movies, but we'll see. I have to figure that out for next episode. But either way, guys, appreciate you checking out another episode of House of Power. 2 more to go before the big finale, the big Wolverine and Deadpool Wolverine. So appreciate you guys. Till next time. It's the Berry Feed.